Okay, I'm going to be talking here about a project that, in fact, Janice, who is my collaborator, I'm talking about a collaborative inquiry, so I think it's important to say that Janice is sat here in the audience. And I'm from Liverpool University, and Janice is from the local authority. And so I'm going to say something about, firstly, how I came to be at the university, and then how I came to set up the project with Janice. I'm director of the Centre for the Child and Family at Liverpool University. That is one of the research centres there, and the method research question that we're addressing as a centre, if you like, is how do we individually and collectively integrate research and practice, and I have to say in its full forms across disciplines and between professions, to improve the well-being of children and young people. In the particular project that I'm talking about at the moment, that was the main focus of the question that we were addressing. And just very quickly to say where my background was, I was originally qualified as a social worker. I worked in the social work profession for many years, then in social work education, and ran my own business for a long time, working as a consultant and an educator amongst all the healthcare professionals, education professionals, social workers, etc. And really became very impressed by a lot of very good professional practice that was going on. Did my PhD, came to the end of my PhD, and one of the things that I really learned in that time was about the divide between the academic and professional world, and felt that the academic world wasn't being influenced enough by the experience and learning of professionals, and felt that the professional world, that the academic world was too distant to the world of professionals really, and professionals were not accessing articles or anything to do with that. And I just felt it was tragic actually that the really good experience of professionals was not informed in the world of academia, and tried to look at how I could do that from within, influence that from within the professional context, and was just couldn't get in. The academic world was pretty impermeable actually. And if you just look at a very large conference like this, 800 and odd people, how many people from professional backgrounds are actually here? Not too many, a very small minority really, and there isn't a lot of really dynamic dialogue between the two. So I set up the Centre for the Child and Family mainly to try and address something about that. Went there 2 years ago, and at that same time, and for any of you who are interested in the concept of synchronicity and the meaningful coincidences, at the exact point in time when I was thinking, because I came to Liverpool and I didn't know Liverpool, that's not where I live, that's not where I work, completely strange. Where do I start here? And then out of the blue, this person called Janice comes along and says, I'm really interested in looking at someone who will work with us as a local authority to improve practice in terms of the well-being of children and young people, which was absolutely great, a wonderful opportunity. I was being influenced very quickly. Some of you were at the symposium that we did yesterday, so we gave a lot more information about the project as a whole. And if anyone here wants more information, I'm very happy to give you a paper. There's one coming out in Educational Action Research in the next edition, I think, that comes a lot to the ground of this, and another one that I've written that does more about this concept of Boyer's model of scholarship, which I was influenced by coming into the university, just as a way of trying to communicate what I wanted to do. And Boyer was in America in 1990, really saying that traditional models of scholarship were out of sync, that universities focused too much on the idea of research, and scholarship should be much more expanded than that. So that equal to research, there should be teaching and learning, which was really interesting at my particular university, which was promoting research and actually not paying enough attention to teaching and learning at that point. I think that balance is beginning to be addressed now, but it's been a little bit out of focus for a while. But also the interest for me then is how do you apply the learning and the research that takes place in academic context into practice? And then how do you, I've worked across professions for many, many years and worked across very, different disciplinary settings. I've done sociology, psychology, philosophy, criminology, right across the social sciences really, but had also done quite a lot of work for my PhD as a layperson in quantum physics and other of the sciences. So really felt there was a lot of value to be done across disciplines. So I felt this model in terms of just projecting what I was interested in doing and representing what I stood for was a really useful way for me presenting this academically. Shown in terms of saying what needs to happen if you were going to put Boyd's model into practice, stated that if we were going to have this new idea of scholarship that brought together research, teaching and learning, application and practice and integration across disciplines, that it would require actual research. In other words, to learn how to bring these four together. And to me, we were having a discussion yesterday. People have different ideas as to what action research is. So I take a very straightforward understanding. To me, there are two essential principles of action research. Firstly, it's about research that wants to improve the world, that it's not just about describing it or explaining it or interpreting it. It's people engaging in research who want to actively improve the world in some kind of way. And the second part for me is that it's a cyclical process, basically a cyclical process of action and reflection. Now, people have different models. That's one there: reflect, plan, act, observe, etc. It can be a very complex cyclical process, but at its most simplistic level, it's about action and reflection cycles. And in a spiral, on the principle that you don't walk into the same river twice. When you're going through those cycles, it's not a repetitive replication mode, it's a developmental learning mode, and within that, for me, the creation of new knowledge. So just because a large part of what I wanted to do about this presentation is more about the methodology really than about the actual project itself. So I just wanted, and I put this in after the discussion around action research yesterday that I had with 2 or 3 people, that it offers a research process that is open-ended and includes an exploration by the individual action researcher of the implications of asking, researching and answering questions that are focused on improving practice and on understanding the processes of improving practice. So what is actually going on in order to improve practice. In relation to the work that I'm doing, I'm very interested in 2 forms, what I understand to be 2 forms of action research. There are a whole range of different approaches, but for me, it's a living theory approach to action research and collaborative inquiry. So at this stage, I'm going to say something very briefly about the project that we were involved in and to which we were going to, if you like, use these 2 methodologies. When Janice approached me, she was very concerned that a lot of money was being spent on training courses and on conferences from practitioners from early year settings, from the independent and voluntary sector. People who'd gone on courses, but when she went around in her role of schools improvement consultant with a special remit for day nursery settings, there wasn't the improvement that you would expect given the amount of money that was being spent. And she had also done her master's on practitioner research. So to use a word we were using yesterday with that, she was passionate about practitioner research, but wasn't getting the opportunity to use that in her work setting. And she was just exploring whether there was anyone within the university who would be prepared to work with her to introduce the practitioner research inquiry into Liverpool, into the County Council, working with these early years practitioners. So what we did was invited a group of these early years practitioners to a meeting to just tell them what we were planning to do, and what I had discussed with Janice was to set this up as a form of collaborative inquiry. She was interested in how the practitioners would improve practice with children, and so we said we don't actually know what they should do. It's going back, we wanted to involve them from the outset actually in this inquiry. So we wanted to engage them in the process of asking that question and exploring with them what they could do. And so invited them to be part of an ongoing inquiry. And a large number of them, I think we had 40 odd come to that initial meeting, and in the end we had over 20 plus people involved in the inquiry, one way or the other. So the 2 methods, because of the collaborative inquiry, let's just start with the living theory. What we wanted to do was for each of them to develop their own way of engaging in this journey, if you like. And this is where we felt that a living theory approach to action research, and where I felt would be really helpful. So for me, in terms of what living theory means in relation to action research, and I realise that this is a debatable issue, but I'm just giving my understanding of it, is what makes living theory approach to action research distinctive is one that it does focus on the I, is how do I want to make a difference, how can I improve what I do, what really matters to me, how do I want to make a difference in the world, and what are my values. And then in the process of doing that, what I'm reflecting on are what have been the influences in me, what's brought me to where I am today, how can I influence the learning of others, and how do I influence the wider social cultural context in which I'm living and working. Now, also within that, there is a danger of the I, it just stays in the individual journey, and within that kind of, people working with living theory, this is an ongoing question for me. How do you stop this just being a very isolated research endeavour? If I'm just focusing on me and improving my practice, where does that stand in terms of my learning from others and influencing the learning from others? And I've been a real strong advocate of cooperative inquiry for a long time. I've worked on a 3-year cooperative inquiry with a group of people who were interested in the whole concept of transforming the world through transforming self, which is very similar kind of concept if you think about it, that there are lots of difficult things happening in the world, lots of people want to change the world and make it better, but actually the only person you can change is yourself. So it has to start with the I, which again comes back to why I think living theory has a lot to offer. The only person who we can influence is ultimately ourselves, but then we also need to think about ourselves in relation to others and what that means in terms of how we work with others. So John Heron in cooperative inquiry includes 2 or more people researching a topic through their own experiences of it, using a series of cycles in which they move between this experience and reflecting together on it. Each person is co-subject in the experience phases and co-researcher in the reflective phases. And so collaborative inquiry brings together individuals to work with others to create ways in which the rights and uniqueness of the individual can be realised, having responsibility for the rights and uniqueness of others and for the well-being of all. I did a huge amount of communication skills work with people, including assertive skills work in my time, and it's based on the principle of I have rights and you have rights also. And to me, a large part of life is about how do I get a balance between who I want to be and how I am in the world, but how I create a space for you to be the person that you want to be also, and how I work out what that balance is so I get it right. I don't put, people have come from belief backgrounds, don't they, where they serve other people and it doesn't matter whether they are neglected themselves, and I don't stand for that actually, but I also don't stand for the fact that I come first and then need to prioritise myself over others. It's a kind of equality that for me is just one of the ongoing challenges in life, and how do I that's an ongoing inquiry question for myself, I guess. In terms of the whole principle, and I think this comes back to my questions around the methodology, if I'm looking at that, what I'm really saying is I'm interested in the relationship between the individual and the collective. That can be between myself as an individual or someone else as an individual, and between the collective and group needs. So there's two or three kind of theorists who just talk about this. So Bates is one of these who talks about the ecology of the mind, where he shows that ideas are not contained within the psychology of the individual, but they can be organised into a system of minds, the boundaries of which are fluid and extend beyond the individual. And I just think that, that gives a lot of scope for reflection that in terms of the relationship between the individual and the other and the collective. Rotari suggests that society will reconstruct itself through an expansion of alternative experiences centred around a respect for singularity, undertaken with an awareness and reinvention of the social environment in which the individual is located. So again, this is, if we're going to achieve social change, we need to do that. We need to respect the individual, the one, but we also need to reinvent the social environment. So again, it's this kind of relationship, dialectic between the individual and the social. In terms of the group that we're talking about, and again, I've not said much about this project, but it met over 12-15 months with gaps for summer and Christmas. Big volume of this, and we talked about this yesterday, so I'm not going to say a lot about this, but the main thing that they came was the importance of the work that they did. and the importance of working with parents. But one of the real significant learning outcomes came was that the fact that what they did in every single moment with a child really counted. So how they were in each present moment with each child was of significance. So it introduced into that this concept of the idea of mindfulness. And by mindfulness, I was saying that I suggested that mindfulness meant paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. Now that's come from someone called John Kabat-Zinn, who's taken the idea of mindfulness and introduced it into professions for people to cope with how the stress in their lives, basically. But it has its roots, it has Buddhist origins as its roots, even though it's been taken over into another context. It is very close, the whole Buddhist notion, to Joan's idea of knowing in action, Polanyi's concept of tacit knowing, and relating to the view that knowledge in our action is embodied and can be expressed without active reflection of what is being done. The difference with mindfulness is that there's a deliberate and conscious cultivation of being aware of what is happening in this present moment. And I guess even when you're looking at this relationship between the individual and the group, you know, if somebody's been very conscious of who they are and what they're doing, that's paying attention to them as an individual, but then within the group, how they're interacting, what the response is from the group, how they respond to other people in the group. So this concept of mindfulness, I think, gives a lot of room for exploration, even in terms of the methodology that I'm exploring. We talked about the idea of evidence, and just before we finished, I just wanted to give a couple of demonstrate some of the ways in which we gathered evidence in this project. We have written accounts as a result of, you know, the group members talking about what mattered to them, what was important to them. They would write accounts which were actually quite powerful, and just showing the influence of them doing this together, if you like. There was one person at a very early stage realised that you know, her childhood influences had quite an impact on them. So this was just one account. I'll just leave you to read it actually quite quickly, because I'd rather lose time. So this is a practitioner who at a very early stage kind of got it really. This account is just the beginning of quite a long account, where she then goes on to talk about an experience she then had with her own daughter, and she suddenly realised, you know, that her own daughter might have misunderstood how she would behave. And then she goes on to look at what this means for children in her nursery. And she started having it, you know, really talking about this being in the moment with all her staff in the nursery. And you know, they have just absolutely transformed as a nursery setting. However, there was someone from another nursery who really kind of didn't get it. She was just coming, and she got the point, but she couldn't think there was anything in her background at all, or her, you know, about what really mattered to her that had influenced her. And then one time she was listening to someone else's story, and that story, she said, I've just remembered. And she went away, and a week later she sent us a written account of a time she'd had in school. She had this thing, her value was kindness. It was really important to be kind to people. And she was a really kind person. She cared for them and paid attention to them. And she suddenly recalled this time in school with a teacher who basically bullied her, but a particular incident she remembered was she'd done something the teacher didn't like, and the teacher had stood her up on a desk to kind of tell her off and show her up, and she wet herself. And she felt so disgraced about and embarrassed about having wet herself in front of this whole group. And that had influenced her so much that she was never, ever going to put a child in that position. And this principle of being kind became very central. Now she, in that sense, the link between that experience and being kind had not really struck her. But then she went away and wrote that, and then her journey just kind of went off from there, and we haven't got time to tell the full one of that, but that was a kind of trigger event for her. We took photographs, not very good different at the moment, but it just gives you an idea. Here this child's playing musical instruments and the member of staff is just, in a sense, replicating every action the child does, and the practitioner does as well. And just they show something about, you know, their sense of connection with these young people. So we've got lots of photographs, lots of videos, and I think we haven't really got the time to show this, but it's on YouTube. It's just a practitioner who is talking about, well, there's two practitioners really, what the impact has been of being part of this project to them and what it's meant to them. And I think when we're talking about evidence, we're just going through these these are what comes through in terms of that, and you know, we can play later if you want, but I think I should leave it there and leave it